Okay, so I'm gonna try and help you guys to understand how to easily find out the independent and dependent variable when you're given an experiment or an experimental design. So I'm going to use this as an example. So a student asked, does the wavelength of light affect the growth of a plant? Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is look to see what you're measuring. So in this case, the thing that we are going to measure is how the plant grows, okay? So what you measure is the dependent variable, is what is measured. And if you remember, dependent variable equals the data. Okay, so dependent variable data. So in this case, the dependent variable is the growth of the plant. Therefore, the independent variable is the wavelength of light, because it says, does the wavelength of light affect the growth of the plant? Okay, the next way that is helpful in determining independent variable and dependent variable very quickly is you use an if-then statement. Put the other one down here, okay? So you look at this and you go, well, I have to change that into an if-then statement. So does the wavelength of light affect the growth of a plant? So if you say, if I change the wavelength, then the plant will grow differently. It depends on what wavelength you use. And if you have some idea about wavelength, you can say, if I use green light, the plant will grow taller. If I use red light, the plant will grow less. So the wavelength of light is actually the color of the light. So you guys, I'm sure you guys remember when you shine white light into a prism, you get a rainbow, okay? And you get the Roy G. Biv. Well, each of these is called a wavelength. And each wavelength of light has a certain color, which is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, even though it's white when they're all mixed together. This is my flashlight or whatever. So if I shine white light into a prism, it separates the white light into its component wavelengths. So if and then, that will help you. Now, how is that going to help you figure out independent variable? Well, this part is the independent and this part is the dependent. So that's another great way. And then the last great way is to, if you have a graph. And this is where dry mix comes in, okay? So on this side is dry and down here is mix. And this is the x-axis and this is the y-axis, okay? So the dependent or responding variable goes on the y-axis and the manipulated or independent variable goes on the x-axis, okay? So this is where the independent variable goes, that's the I, and the dependent variable goes on the y-axis. Okay, so if you have, well, let's use our wavelength of light, okay? So we have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, just keep going. And then the height of the plant is going to be here, and this is called wavelength. And you can measure how tall the plant grew when it was exposed to red light, how tall it grew when exposed to orange light, how tall it grew in yellow light. I'm just making this up because I have no idea. But so those are quick ways to find out how to understand independent and dependent variable when you're given an experimental design.